Kel'Roth is here to talk about Remnant 2 bosses, ranked from worst to best. Firstly, no aberrations allowed, those are just regular enemies on steroids and we are here for actual bosses. The ranking is based on gameplay, lore and design. Does the fight feel fair and engaging, or is it just a mess of unavoidable attacks? Does the boss have a compelling backstory that adds to the world, or are they just standing in our way for no good reason? Do they look like something out of a cosmic horror nightmare, or would I find them around the corner of a Yasha tea stall? If a boss nails all three departments, they are making it to the top of the list. If not, well, that might still be cool, but they won't be the best. If you think I got any of the bosses' rankings wrong, drop a comment and let me know which boss deserves a higher or lower spot. Like the video if you want me making more niche game ranking videos, and subscribe if you have ever been one-shot by a move you swear you dodged. Now, let's get into it. Coming in dead last at number 33, we have the Cinderclad Monolith. And oh boy, this is a letdown. No lore, no interesting mechanics. This boss is essentially a giant pot that shoots stuff at you. That's it. Just a glorified jar construct that got hit with a growth spell and decided to cosplay as a boss. These jar constructs are a regular enemy, by the way. That's gonna be common. They didn't even bother giving it a unique design. And for a DLC boss, that is insulting. You're telling me we paid extra for this? Let's just say it's lucky I didn't have a 34th spot to put it in. Coming in at number 32, we have Abomination. Well, it's an abomination, alright. This thing is just a glorified corpse ball, a bunch of drizzer bodies glued together by a corpse glue, I guess, I don't know, and puppeteered by a parasite. And if you have been to Nehru, you know these parasite-controlled corpses are everywhere. It doesn't bring anything new to the table. Lore-wise, it's a complete dud too. Its item drops just ramble on about the Drizzer's scientific obsessions, which, while interesting, doesn't really add anything to this particular encounter. Gameplay, predictable and frankly a bit of a snooze fest. The only reason it's not dead last is because, well, at least it has some atmosphere. Number 31, we have got the Bloat King here. The only thing royal about this guy is his size. It's just an oversized version of the regular ooze enemies from the Grand Sewers, which are already just little blobs of electrified goop. This king is like if they all fused together and decided to call themselves royalty. Well, it is big enough that even the Grand citizens steer clear of the sewers. The Bloat King just chills on the ceiling, zapping you with electricity like some overgrown light fixture with a grudge. Sure, that's technically unique, but it doesn't exactly scream thrilling boss fight. However, I'll admit that big wobbly yellow design does have a certain silliness to it, even if it's just a big slime. At number 30, we have the Astropath. A boss that had all the potential in the world but somehow ended up as just another glowing red skeleton in Nerude's haunted wasteland. The Drizzer, a race obsessed with science, paradoxically relied on these premonition-gifted astropaths to guide their civilization through the stars. But after Nerude's ill-fated plunge into the black hole of Alepsis-Taura, many of these astropaths ended up as spirits, aimlessly drifting around their ruined world. And this one, he's just another face in the ghostly crowd. The fight itself is forgettable, nothing about its attacks or mechanics makes it stand out. The one redeeming factor is how you reach him, stepping into a pod to enter the battle, which at least gives a slight sense of mystery, along with its eerie atmosphere. This could have been a major story moment, maybe an astropath who rivaled Tal'Ratha, the chief of the order, someone with real weight in the story. Instead, we got a boss fight that's about as prophetic as a broken fortune cookie. Number 29, the Custodian's Eye. Basically the head honcho of all the little sentinels patrolling Nerude, zapping Drizzer corpses and their pesky parasites under orders from the Custodian himself. Think of it as the ultimate Roomba, but instead of cleaning dust, it's vaporizing the remnants of its masters. It's got a mildly interesting backstory. Its core, the source of its insane power efficiency, was something the Drizzer accidentally invented, which, let's be real, is the most scientist thing ever. The design, cool, but is just a bigger version of the Sentinels we have already seen. The fight itself is decent, nothing groundbreaking, but not a total snooze fest either. At the end of the day, it does its job as a secondary boss just okay enough in Remnant 2 standards. At number 28, we have Magister Dullain, a prime example of how not to age gracefully. Lantern horrors like Dullain are nothing new in Lawsome, so whatever shock value its intro scene should have had, well, that does not exist. She is holed up in the Shattered Gallery, a place filled with relics of Dran history, and she has been busy corrupting the Ichor, an extract from some unknown deity, turning it into a weapon. So yeah, she is basically the embodiment of Dran religious corruption. The fight itself is not unique, obviously, but not bad either. The design a little generic, even if you ignore the fact that it's just another lantern horror with a fancy title. In the end, Dullain is creepy sure, but in a way that makes you think, haven't I seen this before? At number 27, we have Shrewd, a clear nod to Shroud from the first game, but with a fresh coat of root-infested paint. As the commander of the Slayers, the bow-wielding infantry that has overrun Yesha, Shrewd may just be a powder version of them, but at least it feels like a boss. The distinct colors and outfit make it stand out, giving off that I am in charge here vibe, even if it's still just another root extension. Gameplay-wise, it's actually pretty fun. Shrewd teleports between platforms, raining down arrows before dropping in for some melee action, all while summoning mobs to overwhelm you. But the best part? You can stop these mobs before they even hatch from their eggs, which is fair enough. While it may not be the most unique boss ever, it earns its place by at least making the fight engaging. Plus, as far as root commanders go, this one's got style. Number 26, the Root Mantis. A creature born from the root's twisted imagination, designed to embody our worst fears. Someone must have really feared mantises, huh? The root invades different worlds that have sentient species, then they infiltrate their minds to check what their worst fears are, and then imitate them. This giant mantis-like root amalgamation is Earth's most prominent root presence right now, and yet, it's just the tutorial boss. That alone tells you how far the root has fallen on our planet. We face this boss with a party of 4, ourselves and 3 NPCs. Sure, it's a clever way to showcase the co-op mod, but honestly, did we really need the hand-holding? The fight is fun and surprisingly easy, so the extra help feels a bit unnecessary. That said, the Root Mantis does stand out with its unique design, both visually and gameplay-wise, very rare and surprising for a Remnant 2 side boss. While it's essentially a root creature shaped into a giant mantis, it's still a decent look for a tutorial boss. Number 25. The Nerudian Reaper is a fascinating glimpse into Nerud's agricultural ingenuity. Hosting the Drizzer race, Nerud relies on an intricate farming system powered by repurposed harvest reapers. These machines have a bizarre life cycle, starting as robot larvae hatched from artificial egg sacs called replication pods. Once they mature, they join the automated workforce, tackling planetary scale farming with precision. It's not particularly unique, though it's amusing to see a Seeker, or those red glowing skeletons, commandeering a defunct Reaper like it's their personal right. Number 24. Gwendil the Unburnt is what happens when you mix alchemy, fire, and a whole lot of social rejection. After the one true king took his nap and the Fey realm started merging with the Dran just decided to look the other way, ignoring the chaos like it was a messy roommate situation. Even when the Fey literally killed their brethren, the Dran, in a collective hive mind said, nah, that's not happening, I'm just gonna ignore that. But Gwendil, she wasn't having any of it. Branded a witch for using alkahest powder, a huge breakthrough in Dran alchemy, she became an outcast, and over time she just snapped, seeing her brethren getting killed and ignored. Now she is a fiery force of vengeance, hopping from platform to platform, lobbing witch-fire grenades while her mob of followers tries to carve us up in melee combat. The fight itself? Decent. The best part of this boss could have been her crazy dialogues, to make up for the fact that she just looks like any other female Dran. But she's restricted to "they are here" like any other Dran as well. Honestly, if she spent more time writing scripts, she could have been more memorable. Number 23, the Stondewarden. Deep in Yaisha, untouched by the root, Lydusa commands an army of living stones, and this guy is basically one of their poster children. Just another warrior made of animated rock. The only thing setting him apart? A bit of dry grass sprouting from his pallid lodestone. Like he's trying to convince us he once had a personality. Design-wise, he blends right in with every other stone warrior, but at least the fight has a unique twist. While the Stondewarden himself isn't all that special, dodging a barrage of incoming statues in what the game files apparently call dangerous chess is a highlight. And honestly, any boss fight that makes me feel like I'm in an ancient deadly board game is alright in my book. Amalgams in Nerud are about as common as bad decisions in a horror movie. But number 22, Kel'Roth and Relis at least have some tragic backstory to set them apart. These two were once elite Fetir pilots, using artificial intelligence to push the limits of both machine and flesh. They were put into cryostasis for emergencies, but as we know, their journey to Alepsis-Taura went horribly wrong, melding them with their robotic companions and turning them into something straight out of a sci-fi nightmare. Whether they're controlled by parasites or just stuck in the worst sleep paralysis ever remains a mystery. This is the only boss fight in the whole game where you take on two bosses at the same time, which makes things significantly more enjoyable and harder, especially if your DPS is lacking. Two buffed of amalgams? Yeah, that's a problem, but visually be glad down. They look just like every other amalgam. In the twisted landscape of two root earths, we face Cancer and Venom. Two bosses so alike in their grotesque grandeur that they share this spot in our rankings, sharing the spot of number 20. Cancer, a formidable root spriggan, resembles a monstrous pulsating tree with self-sustaining organs, showcasing the root's terrifying ability to assimilate and adapt. Also, it kinda resembles Asgard. That's interesting. Venom, a relentless root knight, is linked to the Dread Core, a steel-beating entity rumored to induce madness upon prolonged exposure. All of the lore only says that they are very strong. That's kind of it. Unlike every other root creature, both embody the root's chilling essence, emphasizing the corruption more than their individual stories. For example, we learn from this too that the most powerful creatures of the root are not necessarily not those who have lived the longest, but they're more likely creatures who adapted faster, evolved faster. Visually, they don't stray far from their lesser counterparts. Up until now, only Shrewd has been quite visually different from the mob it is based on. Even final mandatory mini-bosses like Cancer and Venom unfortunately are not different visually, and this is especially hurting for the rankings because, well, they are mandatory mini-bosses, and they are final bosses. So yeah, it is disappointing. Like, slightly change the colors, man, or give it extra clothing. They, I guess, have an extra glitch attack, but that's it. Their designs are undeniably cool, with Venom having a slight edge in the looks department, yet they're not unique. They made something so cool yet chose to copy-paste it in their areas. It's just a shame. Both encounters are challenging and exhilarating though, fitting for the final stages of the game. Their attack patterns keep you on your toes, making each battle a memorable test of skill. Simply speaking, they are very cool, just not unique. Number 19. Mothermind is the ultimate nightmare fuel for anyone who gets constantly caught by the root flayers. As the progenitor of all these flying root menaces in Yaisha, it doesn't just bring chaos, it is chaos. It produces an eerie cacophony of voices through its cordyceps gland, a result of the root's hive mind, and thanks to the pan deciphering their communication, we know it all boils down to one simple directive: annihilate everything. And boy does it try. This massive airborne horror looms over the battlefield, and it finally breaks the trend of bosses just being bigger versions of the minions. It's got its own distinct look, though nothing too wild, just what you'd expect from a spawning creature. Mothermind keeps things interesting with a platform hopping mechanic as well. It smashes platforms one by one, forcing you to stay on the move in a circular pattern. Honestly, it's a fun enough fight. Well, unless you're bad at jumping. In that case, Mothermind isn't just a boss, it's a very judgmental gravity test. Number 18. Sha'Hala is what happens when you take an eldritch horror, slap it inside a spaceship, and forget to make it actually feel like part of the spaceship. Imagine if the Death Star's core was just a glowing octopus. Yeah, it's kind of like that. As the physical manifestation of Neru's heart, its energy core, you would expect something more mechanical, technological. Sure, it's visually striking, but does it scream power source? Not really. And Sha'Hala's lore is basically, hey, I'm the spaceship's battery and the Custodian wants to harvest me to eat Nirud back into the black hole. Cool concept, but the Custodian's story ends up stealing the spotlight, leaving Sha'Hala feeling like a glorified MacGuffin with limbs. And then there's the fight itself. Sha'Hala stands in place the entire fight, much like Mother Mind, except at least Mother Mind makes you jump around. Sha'Hala just throws a ton of lasers, homing orbs and throws hands on the floor that feels more frustrating than challenging. The spectral and physical versions of Sha'Hala barely feel different beyond a bluish-purple hue, their drops and the story tweak. It's not a bad boss, but among the 9 world bosses, it's definitely the weakest. Number 17. Lydusa's story is a tragic tale of betrayal, vengeance and, well, becoming a really angry floating head. No, there will be no head jokes, okay? This is a family-friendly channel. In the hidden corners of Yaisha, untouched by the root, her domain stands as a relic of a long-lost Pan tribe. She was once the revered goddess of living stones, offering her protection in exchange for marriage to the Pan king, Talos. Things went smoothly, until the king's priests decided they wanted her power for themselves. So like the worst kind of matchmakers, they tricked Lydusa into a fake rendezvous, ambushed her, and Talos seeking her head. Of course there's gonna be a head joke. Talos fought against his own men and got killed in the process. Enraged, Lydusa wiped out the entire tribe. But not before they managed to shatter her body, leaving her in pieces across the land. When we arrive, we meet Walt, a descendant of the fallen Pan tribe, who assumes Lydusa was just a vengeful monster. He tries to seal her away by betraying us and, surprise, gets himself killed. But if we actually restore her, she turns out to be pretty chill, even inviting us to dance. Unfortunately, as just a floating head, she's not feeling too friendly. And yeah, the head. Why? You could have had the same exact different outcomes here. The good one would make Lydusa sane and whole, and the bad one would make her whole, but not sane yet. What I'm saying is, a head should not be a final boss. As for the fight, it's a multi-phase ordeal that forces constant adaptation. First, she barrages you with aerial attacks, sand traps and tracking bolts. The final phase is the real test. A tight corridor where dodging rock slabs and hitting weak spots becomes a desperate race against the time as the worlds close in. It's a demanding fight, but the DPS check at the end can feel a bit too strict. Lydusa's battle stands out for its variety and high energy pacing. She is the second worst world boss in fact for a very generic lore, weird choice of the head being the one we fight with and the unbalanced DPS check. Number 16. The Primogenitor is less of a boss and more of a statement. A grim reminder that Nerud's horrors are far from over. When the Great Drizzer civilization was dragged into Alepsis-Taura, most of everything perished. Most, not all of them. Tal'Ratha may have been one survivor, but another life form adapted to the chaos. A parasitic insectoid race that now controls Drizzer corpses, turning them into shambling husks. And at the root of this infestation, the Primogenitor, the original parasite. The Primogenitor is a striking little terror. Its vibrant blue exoskeleton pops against the dull, lifeless husks it controls, giving it an eerie, unnatural glow. Unlike its minions, it actually looks distinct, almost perfect for a mini-boss. Almost. The problem? It doesn't really feel like a boss. Instead of a tense, skill-based showdown, the fight quickly devolves into a messy, frustrating crowd control exercise. The Primogenitor hijacks flying hatches. It just means dealing with a constant onslaught of parasites, shifting focus away from the boss itself. And that's the real problem. The Primogenitor is supposed to be the big bad parasite, but, well, it's a small bad parasite. Not particularly intimidating, and spends more time sending minions after you than actually fighting. A larger, more imposing form and some unique attack patterns could have made this battle truly memorable. Instead, it becomes a repetitive slog that's more annoying than epic. Still, I find it very funny that this guy survived a fucking black hole, and the design is neat, it's just too small. Number 15. Legion. Once a devoted member of the Lemire priestly order, Legion is now a root-infested nightmare, wielding insanity as a weapon more effectively than most of his corrupted kin. Maybe it's the lingering pan-faith twisted into the root's corruption. The Agnosia driftwood fragments found in his body suggest some seriously ill-advised magical experience, because nothing screams good idea like fusing your soul with ancient rot wood. Legion nails the horror aesthetic. His humanoid form draped in tattered robes would be creepy enough, but the real star of the show is that swirling red vortex where his head should be. An ever-churning mass of madness, framed by writhing root tendrils. It perfectly captures his role as a conduit for insanity. As for the fight itself, it's fine. Legion's ability to inflict madness is a great concept. For a mini-boss, the experience is solid, just not mind-blowing. Number 14. The Huntress. Also known as Briella, is a regal fey hunter from Lossum known for methodical precision in hunting and eliminating souls. Her weapon, the venerated Spearhead, was gifted to her by Namue in exchange for services that remain shrouded in mystery. Along with her trusty goat-like steed and the sacred hunt feather, she is a formidable presence. However, the Huntress's visuals don't do justice to her rich backstory. Her design lacks the flair expected from someone with divine and royal ties, being a descendant of brothers Aramir and Aramor, who defeated a god. With a stronger design to match her royal Fey nature and more engaging mechanics that reflect her connection to the Fey, this boss could have been more memorable than it is. She is this high up because her presence in the Dran cities are a nice touch to both the map and herself. She can be encountered in different places, always found sleeping. We can even go into her dream using the dream catcher. Maybe if this sleepyhead was encountered more than once, it would have gone even higher. Number 13. The Corruptor is proof that sometimes even the biggest bosses can feel kind of forgettable. Cause we remember the Pan-Guardian, not the Corruptor. This towering root monstrosity is nothing more than another extension of the root's corruption, with no real lore to set it apart. Meanwhile, its poor bodyguard, the Pan-Guardian, has been through the ringer, once a proud protector of Yasha, then slain by us in Kronos, only to be resurrected and puppeteered by the root like some twisted trophy. The Pan once worshipped this mighty guardian, and now is nothing more than a mindless pawn, showcasing that the root can corrupt even the most powerful of beings. Visually, the Corruptor looks imposing, but that's about it. Outside of his size and a glowing maw, there's nothing distinct about it. No unique design elements that scream, "I am the Corruptor," rather than just, "I am another root thing." In fact, if you swapped it with the Mother Mind, would anyone really notice? Probably not. The Pan-Guardian at least remains visually solid, just an upscaled version of its Kronos self. The floating platforms and jumping mechanics add a nice layer of challenge, but the core loop, dodging beams, dealing with the Pan-Guardian's detachable arms, and managing its constant revivals, can feel repetitive. If you're fast enough to kill it within 2 revivals, which is common on lower difficulties, the fight is actually pretty manageable and fun. But no matter how well it plays, the Corruptor ranks low simply because it lacks what every great boss needs: identity. At the end of the day, it's just another big root beast. Tal'Ratha is a colossal disappointment wrapped in a decaying flashy package. I say this, but he is number 12. Well, I simply expected more. Once the chief astropath of Nerud, he is now stuck in a power struggle with the Custodian, the machine caretaker of the ship, over the future of their doomed mission. The Custodian wants to dive into the black hole for the ultimate cosmic gamble, while Tal'Ratha's like, maybe don't. Unfortunately, Tal'Ratha's descent lands him in a predicament where you, the player, must choose to either side with the Custodian and deceive him, or let Tal'Ratha consume you. Yes, you heard that right. Get eaten. Because apparently, in Tal'Ratha's twisted mind, consuming the remnants of his people is how you achieve communal eternity. Sounds fun, no? Now, Tal'Ratha's physical design is meant to be imposing, with a grotesque skull-like face and a bulbous body, seated upon a platform within the prison's deteriorating environment. But the design falls flat in delivering the full scope of his lore. The real kicker is that Tal'Ratha's metaphysical battle, which takes place in some weird alternate dimension inside his body, is never properly hinted at before the encounter. You are just thrown into the strange place after being eaten. Sure, mysteries are a staple of Souls-like and Soulsborne games, but this one feels like a bit of a stretch. His physical design just doesn't do justice to his lore. He blends too much with his environment as well. He's just a big, fleshy blob. A little more flair wouldn't hurt. When it comes to the fight itself, it's pretty much what you'd expect from a massive, slow creature. It's not unbalanced, just painfully lackluster. The gameplay is reminiscent of a souped-up covetous demon. But the metaphysical version is a few times better and more interesting, as portals and teleportations are included. But even that's not enough to elevate the experience. The fight is simply too tedious and lacking in excitement. So how did Tal'Ratha end up this high on the list? Well, it's more due to his lore than the actual gameplay and his covetous design. Number 11. The Sunken Witch is a boss that had all the potential to be a memorable encounter as well, but ultimately falls into some familiar tropes. As an ancient Dran sea witch, she carries a lot of intrigue. Her lore hints at her possible involvement in voodoo-like practices, potentially manipulating the one true king to wipe out the Fae, to replace the Dran as his subjects. It's a rich backstory and it sets up the kind of boss fight that could have delved into some serious mysticism. However, the execution leaves something to be desired. The witch's main attack involves swinging her hook and climbing walls to drop down. An interesting mechanic, which is fun with all the breakable stuff, but she's a witch of unknown origin, who thinks even the Fae as playthings. Why isn't she using magic? Why is she just using the hook? What could have made this fight truly stand out is the potential to tap into her voodoo-like lore. As it stands though, it feels like I'm chasing down someone who's been wrongly accused of being a witch, but isn't actually one at all. Kaeula's Shadow is one of those bosses where the lore has a lot of potential but the execution falls flat, especially when it comes to her design. Kaeula, a pan-demigod known as Mother Stream, has an intriguing backstory. She is a being who bestows blessings on mortals and shares a complex relationship with her sibling Maedra, who doesn't approve of her sister's interactions with humans. After Kaeula's defeat, Maedra feels a strange sense of relief, despite her earlier disdain for Kaeula's mortal connections. The lore surrounding Kaeula is rich with existential questions about divinity and the role of mortals in a pantheon, making her death and the tear of Kaeula's exchange with Maedra quite poignant. It's one of the more intricate relationships in Yasha's divine drama. But here's the issue. Kaeula's Shadow is an absolute visual letdown. Despite her divine status, she's turned into just another generic root X-Men, which feels lazy. I get it, she's been corrupted by the root, but come on, you could have done better than just slapping an X in her hands and calling it a day. Considering her divine nature, the design could have included some godly features, like you already have her sister's model. Just add some of the root's corruption creeping in. You could have had the exact same gameplay with another model. Heck, even just a unique weapon could have helped elevate her appearance and capture her status. Instead, she feels like any other giant root X-Men you'd find right when you land in Yasha. That said, the gameplay is where this encounter shines. If this is your first mini-boss, your expectations will skyrocket for the rest of the game. It's honestly the best dungeon boss in the base game, which unfortunately means that the subsequent fights just don't compare. Number 9. The Labyrinth Sentinel is what happens when the Keeper needs a Guardian in a hurry and decides, screw it, a giant Rubik's Cube will do. After the original Labyrinth Guardian was slain in Chronos, of course by us, the Keeper was left scrambling to create a new defense system. He constructed this hexagonal nightmare, a floating mess of stone cubes that shift in rhythmic patterns, moving as if it were doing some kind of geometric dance. Visually, the Sentinel is stunning. It looms over the barren, fragmented landscape of the labyrinth, its massive shifting cubes glowing with eerie purple energy. It's minimalist, yet deeply intimidating. One of the best simpler bosses design out there. However, it doesn't exactly scream combat ready at first glance. There's nothing about his design that immediately tells you how the fight will play out, until you are suddenly getting crushed into fine paste. And that brings us to the fight itself. The Sentinel is quite divisive in the community. It's a relentless puzzle of dodging, sprinting, and blasting glowing weak spots before you are flattened into interdimensional roadkill. The instant kill mechanics can feel more punishing than fun for some players, but for others, like me, it's an absolute thrill. The high-stakes nature of the fight, combined with its relentless movement, makes for an adrenaline-fueled battle unlike any other. Some might call it gimmicky, but I'd call it one of the most exhilarating fights in the game, even though it's actually a gimmick. Regardless, love it or hate it, you are definitely going to remember it. Number 8. The Nightweaver. As Namue's sister and a fellow goddess, she was originally responsible for crafting the dreamscape for the Fae. But dissatisfaction festered within her long before the collision of the two worlds. When the Fae and Dran realms merged, her sanity shattered and she embraced her darkest desires, stalking the Dran, feeding them terrifying visions and then quite literally feasting on them, hearts and all. Even Namue, who had knowingly ignored her sister's darkness, finally acknowledged that she had to be stopped. The lore behind the Nightweaver is solid, but I can't help but feel like it could have taken a more psychological route. Instead of physically consuming the Dran, she could have thrived off their suffering, driving them to madness and committing self-die through relentless nightmares. It would have been a unique approach, especially since the game is already packed with physical horror. But as it stands, her story still delivers on the eerie gothic atmosphere. The Nightweaver is haunting but not particularly unique though. Her towering ethereal form with elongated limbs and a glowing green aura gives her an otherworldly presence, yes, but it leans a bit into the "I'm just a spooky ghost lady" aesthetic. The asylum setting, however, is pitch perfect for her, a crumbling, twisted place where her nightmares feel at home. If not for this environment, her design alone wouldn't be enough to carry her. What really sets the Nightweaver apart though is her boss fight. She is the only boss in the entire game with a proper two-phase battle, which is mind-boggling considering not even the final boss gets this treatment. The first phase is a standard open area fight in the courtyard, tense but nothing too special. But just when you think it's over, she grabs you and drags you into a nightmare, trapping you inside the asylum, where she hunts you like something straight out of a horror game. The atmosphere, the claustrophobia, and the sheer dread of being stalked make this one of the most immersive fights in Remnant 2. She might not have the best design, but between her lore, the asylum setting, and the terrifying second phase, the Nightweaver earns her spot here. Number 7. Bruin, Blade of the King, is the perfect example of how simplicity, when done right, can make for an unforgettable boss. He's not overly complex, not drenched in convoluted lore, just a brutal, efficient executioner who gets the job done. As the king's primary enforcer now, Bruin embodies the twisted justice of Blossom. Once a sadistic criminal locked away for his brutality, even by Fae standards, he was given a second chance. Not to redeem himself, but to thrive under the king's rule of vengeance against all the Fae. His violent nature became an asset and now he carries out public executions. His design is minimalistic yet striking. Tall, slender, draped in dark, ornate armor that exudes a cold, calculated power. Unlike many Fae who lean into the ethereal and otherworldly, Bruin is pure grounded menace. No excess, no unnecessary details, just an executioner in the truest sense. The skull hanging from his belt reinforces the perverse inversion of justice in Blossom, where the most violent criminals are now its enforcers. The fight itself is a masterclass in simplicity and fairness. His cross-shaped arena forces players to constantly adjust their positioning, while his attacks punish careless movement. Bruin is the most perfectly executed mini-boss in the entire game. He isn't higher in the rankings simply because, well, he is a mini-boss, meaning his lore isn't as expansive, and our encounter with him is brief. But for what he is, he's flawless. Number 6. Annihilation. What a fitting name for the final boss of Remnant 2. It's not just the last obstacle between you and the credits, it's the living embodiment of the Root's twisted ideology. It believes that true salvation comes from eradicating everything else, a paradox that's as self-contradictory as it is terrifying. This isn't just a fight, it's the culmination of the entire game's story, where the root's flawed philosophy is laid bare. It wants us to just exist, without any senses or feelings. And that isn't living at all. Annihilation starts as a massive dragon-like creature, bathed in an ominous red glow, with outstretched wings that scream final boss energy. Sounds cool, right? Well, dragons in video games are about as common as bad internet takes, and if you played Chronos, you have technically fought this thing before, except you lost? So round 2? Sure, why not? But then comes the twist that truly sets this fight apart. After an intense first phase of dodging massive sword swings, homing projectiles and reality-bending attacks, the dragon's head breaks open, revealing a humanoid figure, not unlike a dreamer, is still attached to its body. Now this is where things get interesting. The second phase shifts into an eerie, glitchy nightmare, complete with flickering transitions, summoned trees and an arena that feels like it's collapsing in on itself. It's unsettling, chaotic and unlike anything else in the game. Sure, the glitching effects can tank your performance, trust me, my PC was crying, but it's all part of the spectacle. It may feel out of place at first, but in a way, it's perfectly out of place. Annihilation is a warped, existential fever dream of a fight that's both frustrating and brilliant. Number 5. The Red Prince. Now, this is a boss with some serious style. Decked out in the finest crimson armor, glowing red eyes piercing through his hood and an aura of pure rebellion, he looks like he walked straight out of a top-selling dark fantasy novel. And honestly, I think this might be the best looking boss in the whole game. His armor, perfection. I need it. I need to cosplay this as soon as possible. But beneath all that style is a story just dripping with drama. He is the son of the one true king, born of a mysterious mother and treated like an unwanted mistake. With fey blood in his veins and a rightful claim to the throne, he wasn't just some spoiled royal. He had supporters, including the Red Knights, who saw him as the ruler they actually deserved. He even tried to overthrow his father before Faerun/Phaelin did, only to get smacked down and exiled. So what did he do? He set up his own little kingdom in the Gilded Chambers, giving refuge to the oppressed, waiting for his moment to take the throne from the imposter kings now. When his father falls, he doesn't just get his revenge, he gets a promotion to the Red King, which by the way isn't obviously his real name. Turns out, when you're royalty in this realm, you don't get a name, just a title. The fight itself is flashy, intense and just like the prince, Fury. His moveset is solid but not super varied. Fire projectiles, some swordplay, summoning clones. Standard stuff, but then phase 2. The dude lights up the whole arena in a massive flaming cyclone, forcing you onto a central platform while he emerges from these flames. He's definitely the best mini-boss in the game, even if his impact on the story should have been bigger. But let's be real, if he had more screen time, I'd probably be kneeling before my new glorious Fey King. Number 4. The One True King. An ancient celestial ruler whose mere slip tore reality apart. His lore, absolutely incredible. His presence, majestic. His actions after waking up, well, mostly just killing the Fae, but hey, he does it with style. His towering form, regal yet alien, looms over the gothic bloodscape of Blossom. His elongated head and flowing robes making him look like something that stepped straight out of a cosmic horror tale. And that hammer? Yeah, that's not just decoration. There are actual living Fae impaled on it. When your weapon is literally made of your former enemies, you know things have gotten serious. But for all that incredible build-up, his actual boss fight, well, it's fine, it's great even. Balanced, fun, but not exactly what you'd expect from a being whose mere existence is stitched into the fabric of Blossom. His moveset, big hammer swings, teleporting, shockwaves, feels less like the divine ruler of a shattered world and more like a particularly angry blacksmith. Oh, by the way, he summons the Dran because they are looking to replace the Fae to be under his role. It's a shame because his story is one of the best in Remnant 2. The king was once a being of order, betrayed and cast down. His kingdom lost to a cosmic disaster. Now he is a ruthless executioner impaling his own people in a twisted display of power. His presence alone is chilling, but his fight never reaches the same level. Maybe he's still under the Sunken Witch's voodoo spell, because this guy should be fighting like an eldritch god, not a particularly vengeful medieval brute. Because if this is how he fights, I am just in shock as to why the imposter kings didn't directly fight him and kill him. Number 3. The corrupted Ravager is one of the best bosses in Remnant 2, but just one of them. It does so much right, yet somehow never quite reaches the absolute top in any category. The lore, phenomenal, the design, fantastic, the gameplay, solid, and yet, something feels just a little short of legendary. Let's start with the story, because wow, this fight is thematically rich. The Ravager, the pan-deity of death, was once locked in an eternal struggle with the dough, the symbol of life. No matter how hard he tried, the dough always escaped. But thanks to the root's corruption, he finally caught it. And now, life on Yasha is hanging by a thread. When you find him, he's just chilling in his den with a wounded dough, radiating pure menace. And he actually offers you a chance to join the root instead of fighting him. Talk about a power move. His transformation from the first game is perfectly done, instantly recognizable but twisted by corruption. Glowing red eyes and wreathing tendrils turning a once majestic figure into something disgusting. The nostalgia hits hard, but it's laced with horror, making the fight feel like a moment of tragic inevitability. Then there's the fight itself. It's good, great even, but not quite as epic as the lore sets it up to be. It plays out like a standard large beast encounter, with lunges, projectiles and brute force aggression. Considering we are battling a corrupted god of death, it could have been so much more. A second phase where he fully becomes corrupt, shifting forms or tearing reality apart, that would have cemented him as an all-time great. At the end of the day, the corrupted Ravager does nothing wrong. It's an incredible fight, but it feels like it was this close to being legendary. Still, you have to give it credit. If this is what a not quite the best boss looks like, Remnant 2 is doing something very right. Number 2. Alepsis-Taura. A reality-breaking, cosmic horror, bullet hell spectacle that makes you feel like a speck of dust in the face of something truly incomprehensible. This is Remnant 2 at its most ambitious, throwing you into battle against the fundamental power nexus of the universe, a swirling, malevolent vortex of unknown doom that makes every other Nerud boss look like a mind or inconvenience. The lore is already next level. The Drizzer, a hyper-advanced civilization, pushed their luck way too far, drawn to Alepsis-Taura like moths to an apocalyptic flame. Their desperation led them into the Convergence, a cosmic entity of limitless energy, so powerful it could fuel every star in existence a trillion times over. What did the Drizzer do? They went in. Spoiler alert, bad idea. And now here we are, at the precipice of existence, fighting something so beyond our comprehension that we probably shouldn't be even looking at it. And the fight itself? Unreal. The bullet hell mechanics are some of the best in the game, an intricate, almost hypnotic dance of lasers, energy orbs, and reality-breaking distortions. The sheer scale of Alepsis-Taura is overwhelming, its massive vortex and grasping tendrils making you feel like an insect trying to swat at a hurricane. And this is not even his final form. I feel like if there is a sequel, it will deal with Alepsis-Taura's race. And the soundtrack, haunting, ethereal, drenched in cosmic doom, seals the deal. Honestly, the soundtrack of the whole game is quite great, but the top bosses, their soundtracks are just something else. The fight with Alepsis-Taura isn't just a battle, it's a desperate struggle against an entity that shouldn't even acknowledge your existence. And let's be real, a black hole boss is fucking cool as fuck. What a way to end the life cycle of the game. The only downside, this thing is so good, it makes the other Nerud world bosses feel like random side quests. But hey, when you're fighting the cosmic entity that could unmake reality, everything else is just filler. Yes, number 1. Befitting only for my glorious kings. Faerine and Phaelin aren't just bosses, they are thematic perfection. These two aren't merely imposters of each other, they are two halves of the same whole, fractured echoes of a once singular entity that should never have split. Their story is one of ambition, betrayal, and a desperate struggle for identity, all set against the decayed grandeur of Blossom. Once a trusted confidant of the one true king, their hunger for power led to the coup that shattered their world. But in seizing the throne, they split, with neither willing to acknowledge the other as their equal. Phaelin claims Faerine is a monstrous pretender, while Faerine sees Phaelin as a deluded fraud. Their rivalry defines present Blossom, as each rules with their own warped sense of legitimacy, their obsession with appearances mirroring their inner turmoil. The fight itself is also an absolute masterpiece. Well, fights. They're kind of the same, but who expected them to be different? The contrast between Faerine and Phaelin is visually stunning. One, a cold and shadowy tyrant, the other, a radiant and golden, pretentious king. Their movements are elegant yet ruthless, a perfect blend of magic and melee, as they weave across the battlefield with mirrored grace. The arena, an opulent throne room dripping in faded splendor, reinforces the weight of their usurpation. This isn't just a fight, it's a duel between the ruined echoes of a fallen monarchy. The choice mechanic, allowing the player to battle either ruler, adds brilliant replayability solely for the dialogues. Because damn, these two are perfectly written and perfectly voice acted. Phaelin is arrogant, pretentious, and insufferably smug, while Faerine is blunt, cutting, and outright hostile. The sheer personality packed into the lines makes every interaction with them a joy, whether you are listening to their pompous speeches or their sharp-tongued insults. At the end of the day, Faerine and Phaelin aren't just great bosses. They might be some of the best in the entire Souls-like genre. Their fight is mechanically tight, visually striking, narratively rich, and soaked in atmosphere. This is how you design a boss battle that feels like an event, a collision of fate and fury, where every slash, spell, and strike carries the weight of a broken world. And that's the list. Remnant 2 has some incredible bosses, and even the ones that didn't make the top spots are still a blast to fight. Mostly. Got a different ranking? Think I disrespected your favorite boss? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, hit like, and if you want more deep dives into Remnant 2 and other Souls-like madness, subscribe, because Kel'Roth is always going to be here from now on, hopefully. I will surely not stop making videos again. Look, I have legit reasons for this delay. Capturing footage for this game made me outright depressed. It's so not streamer friendly. Anyways, see you in the next one.